Okay, a little off script because our next panel, which is going to do a great job on talking more about marketing and customer engagement, Erin Klebaur from Imbue Creative, who's moderating that, is circling a little bit. So I'd like to invite the panelists to come up and have each of the panelists introduce themselves while Erin will be making her way in the next few minutes, and we'll get this panel rolling. So come on up. I know you're in. Grab a seat and I'll kick us off. Thank you, Israel. Thank you, Gary. So Gary, why don't you begin? Why don't you introduce yourself, and why don't you do a 30...
She is here, so she'll be running up very shortly.
Okay, great. And why don't you introduce yourself, and in doing so, just provide a 30-second highlight on the impact and value of AI in marketing. And then why don't we go right down the path, and by the time you do all that, Erin will be here.
Sure, sounds good. So good morning, everybody. Great keynote speaker. So I'm Gary Mann. I am the CEO and founder of Jasfel Analytics. We are a data engineering, AI, and data analytics firm based here in New Jersey. We specialize in helping companies take the plethora of data that they have and turning it into meaningful information and strategies. AI for us is a game changer. It's a game changer on many levels. I'm also a data scientist, so yeah, I was up at 3 o'clock this morning coding, all right, as an example. But I was using
He's excited about that.
Yeah, and I mean, either that or it's the lack of sleep, one or the other. So I've got a lot to say in terms of what AI can do for you. It has probably increased me and my team's productivity. If you talked to me last week, it would have been 25%. I think we're closer to 35%.
Wonderful, thank you.
On, good, no, perfect. Hey everyone, good morning. Izzy Tannenbaum. I am a partner at Witham, which is a public accounting firm. I've been there now for about 5 years, but really have about 20 years experience, always in public accounting. Always in tax, serving all types of clients, but really specializing in tax-exempt organizations, so not-for-profits, employee benefit plans, really anything that is considered a tax-exempt. From an AI perspective, right, I'm not exactly a technology person. I do enjoy it kind of as a hobby, but right, I'm not in there coding. But AI has had a real impact even from the smallest things about my job and has really increased productivity and efficiency, and I can't wait to get into talk about some of those things that are very easily adaptable that can really right away help people be better at their job and produce better content.
Great, thank you, Izzy. Good morning, everyone. My name is Doug Vargo. I'm a vice president at CGI. I lead a group called the Emerging Technologies, and I think what's important as part of today, we've heard a lot about AI, generative AI, but that capability does not sit alone. AI now is a big umbrella term. And with emerging technologies, it's a concatenation of automation, cloud. Let's not forget, all of this is done in the cloud technologies, and many of you are still going to the cloud. So cloud technologies, data management, all of those fundamental capabilities are so, or even more so now, so important to get those right in order to take advantage of AI, generative AI, these large language models. So at CGI, we help enterprise organizations, small organizations, to adopt these strategies, to be able to show very quickly the value of these technologies, and more importantly, solve specific business outcomes. It's not just about deploying a really cool tool. You want to deploy a really cool tool to fix a business problem. And that always has to be kept in mind, the business problem first, the technology second.
Hi everyone, I'm Erin Klebaur. I am your moderator and I'm finally here. I'm a mom of twin boys that gave me a bit of trouble this morning, including our traffic and the lovely cones that I could not find. So thank you for your patience and thanks for introducing yourselves. I'm happy to not have to do that as well, so that's fine. So I am president and owner of Imbue Creative. We are a boutique marketing, branding, and creative firm in Lambertville, New Jersey. I took it over in May 2020 with a crap and heck yeah kind of mentality all at the same time. And it's been the best decision of my life. I'm also president of the United Way of Greater Mercer County. I sit on the Princeton YWCA board. I run a women's group of business leaders. I could go on. And I am excited to be here. Thank you, Michelle and Betty and team for inviting me. And we're gonna cover a couple of different buckets is how we put it together. So trying to give you some of the main buckets that we tend to feel people really want to know about. So we're going to have a lot to cover, and then some good Q&A, ideally. So I'm going to dive right in. And the first kind of theme that we're looking at is the basics, right? What really is AI? What kind of pieces of AI are out there? And as a marketing firm, we are dabbling. I am a poker and a prodder on it, though, because there are some benefits and some cons, in my opinion, if you're not well educated on it. So I'm going to start with Doug, and we're going to look at what is AI and how is it beneficial to businesses.
No, thank you very much. And first, I'll start off with Drew did an excellent job of, number one, his opening remarks were phenomenal, but really baselining what I thought, where is AI today? In my opening remark, I talked about how AI is an umbrella term. There's so many other capabilities now that sit underneath this concept of AI. AI, machine learning, we may have heard, traditional AI. Remember, AI is not new. We've been doing AI for 10 plus years for organizations, helping them look at their data, transform their data, apply algorithms to derive better insights out of your data. What's new is the generative AI. It's about a year, about, 14 months now, so much. And what I really liked about what Drew talked about and why we're so excited about it, especially from a marketing perspective, is the personalization of what you can do from generative AI. Everyone in the room, everyone within your organization, and every student, both at college and high school, are leveraging generative AI. It's the democratization of generative AI right now, being able to participate in these large language models and personalize it down to who you are, but for the folks in this room, who your customer is. And that's so important. The other part I'd like to touch on, especially for small businesses, with generative AI, it allows you to act big. For so many years, you didn't have the budgeting to be able to go out and hire a Google or an AWS, a Microsoft, and bring in these big engines that would produce AI. Now everyone can do it right on an iPhone or an Android device or with your computer. So you have that ability as a 1, 2, 3, 10-person business to be just as powerful and leverage the same models as a Johnson & Johnson or as a Merck right down the road. So you have these opportunities to act big even though you may be a little smaller.
Thank you. And Gary, Doug's talking about generative AI, and we hear all of these different resources. We hear ChatGPT, we hear Gemini, we hear Bing, AI, Microsoft Copilot. Tell us a little bit about these resources and what's the difference between them? How can we leverage them?
Yeah, I think our keynote speaker did a great job of at least introducing everyone here to those concepts. But what we're seeing now is large language models, generative AI, ChatGPT. It's starting to propagate through applications that you're already using. I'll give you an example. So I was sitting over there, Drew was doing a great job. I snapped a picture of him, stuck it on, shared it with LinkedIn, and LinkedIn said, hey, you want me to rewrite this? Sure, I pressed the button. Because why? I'm not the greatest of writers. Can I write? Yeah, sure. But it immediately generated text that was simple, that probably a third grader could understand, right? And so these are the things that we're starting to see now. If you've got a marketing department or you are the marketing department, you're probably using Salesforce, you're using maybe HubSpot or something like that. there's an AI button inside of these tools that you might want to click, just to see what it does and what value it can bring to you and your business. I mean, it's just propagating. My developers, we have Copilot that we use when they're actually coding. Now, they were first, like many, scared that it might replace them, but what we're finding out is that it's not quite as smart as we think it is, meaning AI. It's smart, but not quite as smart, so it still needs that human element to help it do its job. And so there are many places where we're starting to see AI just in the normal course of business. I think earlier in the earlier conversation, it was mentioned about a button inside of Zoom or inside of Teams that you can hit. Click that button because it may actually transcribe every conversation that you have inside of Zoom. And guess what? It can tell, it has the ability to discern the voices that are on the call. And it will tell you person A, person B, person C. And then you have the ability to change that to Gary, to Izzy, or to Doug. So I could go on and on about this stuff. I'll stop right there.
It looks like Doug's itching for something.
I am itching. This is a great topic. How many have already started to leverage what Gary just talked about, Copilot? Anyone using Copilot? What's so really cool about Copilot, not only integration into Teams, but the integration into Outlook. So in Outlook, you can actually hit the button, and it'll take a full email trail and summarize it for you, so you don't have to review every email. You can get every salient point through a summarization. And then it'll pose you a reply that will take in consideration all of those. Once again, I'm the human in the loop, so I need to make sure that it makes sense. Read it 3 times. I think we heard that earlier. And that is very important. But all of these workforce supporting, it will just enable your teams to be able to do more with less and with a level of velocity. And one other point, which is really intriguing to me, and it sounds like we have some technologists in the audience. It started with old languages like C, C#, COBOL, Python, Java. These all make sense to others, foreign to others. But the new programming language now is the natural language. And that is really exciting. To be able to just speak in your natural language and get an output that you had to take years of training for, now you can do in such a short, very amount of time. That is what's going to dramatically change the workforce moving forward, because we all are developers in a way now.
Yeah, and there's just one other example. I mean, that was great, Doug. One other example and one question that I wanted to address that was asked earlier about the diversity of the programs. I think the young lady right here asked it. And so while we're not where we need to be, we're not bad. And I want to give you an example of that. So, we were sponsoring an event. We had to put together a 45-second video, and our marketing person forgot, right? She forgot to, it was on her task list, but, she couldn't get to it. So I get the call, from the event. We need it, like, in 5 hours. I immediately went to Bing Chat, right? We're Microsoft is incorporated. And I asked Chat to create a 45-second text message, marketing message for Jasfel Analytics. It created one, took a couple of iterations. We probably did about 4 iterations. I did about, me and my co-pilot did it, all right? Me and my co-pilot. We did that iteration. After I got the text down, it's a video, right? So I needed images. I asked it to generate images for me of me working or me and/or one of my team members working with a client. It generated a swatch of four images. They look pretty good, but they didn't quite represent our company. We're a little diverse. We got some diversity in our company, right? So I said, well, look, you got to change the lead to make it African American. Do some other things. Within 5 minutes, I actually had 10 pictures. 10 AI-generated pictures that were meaningful to at least our company. So my marketing person, it probably would have taken her like 2 days to do this thing. Not that she wanted to hear this, but I did it in about 25. And handed that off. But that was a combination of using Copilot inside of Bing, along with some other AI products underneath the covers.
That's great. And as a marketing person, I feel his marketing person's pain. But I understand the value, the significant value. What we talked about when we were prepping for this is the reason it's called a co-pilot, right, is because it's not the end-all, be-all. So, Gary, why don't you just say, I asked him, of course, well, then how'd the video get made? And he said, well, I used a marketing person to do the video. And I said, okay, you still need that expertise. It's not an end-all, be-all, right? But it can get you many places way quicker. And maybe even if it's a partial start, it's really valuable. I'll do it all the time, where even if I need to email my team about something, give me a draft. I got all the points. I'm so busy. I just need someone to kind of hand me a 90% or an 80%, and then I tweak, and bam, I'm out. So it's really nice. Izzy, I want to talk a little bit about what to you AI is not. And I'm kind of touching on that a little bit now, but could you give us a little insight?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we've talked a lot about that and had a lot of good examples, right? It is definitely a great tool. It is something that can create a lot of efficiencies and be really helpful. But at this point, at least, it's not a replacement for a human. We talked a lot about the human in the loop, right? You still really need that. You need to understand that this is a tool, right? If you remember back in the day, right, before Google, before that was Yahoo, before that you had to go to the library and look things up, right? So when the search engine came out, that suddenly became a great tool, but it didn't replace the need for a person to actually go and sort through the information and understand what you're looking at. Here, you're kind of taking a step closer where you have someone doing that, but again, you have to really sit there and vet what is the output. A good example, and something I would say that I like to do generally when I'm using AI, is to just ask it, how do you know that, right? So a simple question, this actually happened over the weekend. I had one of those Stanley cups that everyone's running around with the straw sticking out, right? And I was trying to put coffee in it, and then I was like, well, this doesn't make sense. Like, is this straw gonna just like melt into it? Am I drinking plastic? So I popped out ChatGPT and started asking it. And it wrote back right away, yes, definitely, it's for hot and cold. Enjoy your coffee with a smiley face emoji and a coffee emoji. I'm like, great, how do you know that? And then it kind of got a little confused and was like, oh, sorry about that. And then we try to dig a little deeper. And so really you get to the point where you're like, okay, it kind of just said this based on conjecture from the fact that it said the cup can be used for hot and cold, right? So you really got to understand, what is this capable of? What is it doing? Now, in many other instances, we talked about a lot of examples where you'll put in those prompts or you'll ask it a question and it's going to get you something super fast, and oftentimes it'll be correct. But frankly, I think it's really important to understand, like we said, all people are using it now, right? I know a lot of companies block it. My company does actually block ChatGPT. We use Copilot. I think it's because really what we had mentioned earlier about information and proprietary information and not wanting to just put that into a model that's going to then share it. But I use ChatGPT on my phone. So the bottom line is your people and your employees more and more are going to be leveraging this in some way. And it's really important that they understand what this is not and what it's not capable of. Another really good example is I've had a lot of people on my team, and I've encouraged this, use it to help write emails. I have a great person on my team. She's great. She's really smart. English is not her first language, so she can leverage that to help her better write emails more effectively and more efficiently. Now, with that, I will say it does add something that you have to put a little more effort into and be a little more careful, right? You're copying it over, and ChatGPT, if you've ever used it, is very polite, and it'll, respond in a way that it's talking to you. Sure, I can help you with that, right? So when you're copying it over, you want to make sure you're only copying the relevant parts and things like that. Just an extra step you got to be careful about, because again, it's not just a person or an assistant who's going to do everything for you, but it's really, if utilized properly, a great efficiency increaser.
Yeah, one point of note, and at the macro, I absolutely agree. From a macro view, AI will not replace a human. However, at the micro view, AI will replace some of those human activities. So every one of us bringing in invoices is a great example of that. And we have people that have to review those invoices, analyze them, pluck off the specific information, and enter them into downstream systems. That process can be fully automated, from accepting that email or a fax, if we're still doing faxes, by digitizing that information, be able to extract out the relevant metadata, and then enter those through automation into your downstream systems to be able to process a payment, for an example. That whole process can be automated. Now, you may want to put a human in the loop to review it and to verify it, but even that, because computers and automation can be actually a little bit better than a person who gets tired and is distracted and so on. Invoice processing is a great example of where we can utilize automation almost end to end and also kick off downstream systems to be able to help support that. But what does that do? That frees up that individual to go do something more important or more human valued add. Computers don't have empathy yet. So it's important that we let humans do what humans do well, and let computers and automation do what they do well as well.
Great. And Gary, I know we talked a little bit about that topic. Are we going to lose our job and be replaced by AI? People ask me that as a marketing firm all the time. And no, we're all going to evolve. We're going to find something. It's maybe going to make me even stronger. But what is your view, Gary?
No, I agree. And you know, as you were saying that, I think about you know, the very first electronic spreadsheet. And so many of you may not be old enough to remember VisiCalc. VisiCalc was actually the very first Excel. And accountants really thought that they were going to lose their job, because here was an application that could automate just about everything that they do. And if we look in today's environment now, Excel, which is a predecessor, or it has come after, has only enabled accountants to do their job better, faster, quicker, do more strategic thinking, as opposed to the tactical work underneath the covers. And Izzy, you probably can talk more to that, but that's where we're going. And so you kind of have to embrace it. I was at a conference speaking with some educators who were, you know, we were having a lively debate about students using AI. You know, and I was like, well, you know, I was an engineer major, and I remember when the calculator came, and, you know, we couldn't use it there then. Now they use a calculator inside of their classes all the time. It's just on a computer. So I think it's going to evolve. It's going to help us evolve. And I think the more, to Doug's point, the more that you can have AI do those mundane things that you don't like to do on a day-to-day basis, the more strategic you can think and become. Not only that, the more strategic and independent your people can become, your employees. I'm a proponent of pushing AI and automation down as far as you can inside of your organization. You would be surprised at the productivity gains that are possible if you begin to at least do that. Try it with one employee. You know, try to enable that employee with some type of AI. Give them some instructions, and then step back.
Great. I want to touch a little bit more, but yeah, Izzy,
just to
go
touch
ahead.
on that point, because it really is a very interesting thing when you think about, like, especially for the accounting industry. I'm in tax, but you look at auditing, and auditing really relies a lot on sampling. Well, if you have AI looking at something, it can really process. We were talking about invoices, right? 100% of those invoices and review 100% of those, which is definitely a huge change for the entire auditing model that is currently out there. And it's something that is really being thought about in the industry, and is really something that we're going to have to adapt to. But at the same time, It's important to remember that, as we've seen, and that was a great example you gave about the spreadsheets, because I remember when it was still the lined paper, and then right when we switched over. But as these technologies have advanced, and as we've gotten more efficient, the work hasn't gotten less. I think, a long time ago, they used to think the work week would get shorter because, wow, we'd get so much more efficient, we can do the work that took a week in a day or two, and why would we need to do anything else? But what we learned is that now I'm more efficient. I can do that in 2 days. Now I have 3 days more to do something else. So I think from a will I lose my job, and from a human perspective, it may shift and it may change and it may look a little different based on the fact that you now have this great technology to leverage. But I think it is always, to some degree, going to be there.
Good, Doug.
Earlier in the week, I had an opportunity to attend the Gartner conference on data and analytics. And it was one quote that really stuck with me. It was, AI will not take your job. But someone who understands AI and understands the data will. I think that's important. That's a really good take home for you and your employees, because to be able to understand this technology, and Drew hit on it in his opening remarks, understand the technology. You don't need to understand large language models. You don't need to understand what happens underneath it. But how to engage, how to ask those, what we call prompts, which were up on the screen just a little bit ago, how to ask this, follow up, have a conversation with your data. That is what's going to make you more marketable and more resilient to change as we move forward in this new AI generation.
So one thing that I'm also always asked or requested of me is, as a creative, we're developing brands, we're coming up with cool ideas and strategies, and I'm asked, well, could you get that done in like 2 days, 3 days? And I always say, as much as technology is helping us get there, it is not replacing the thought that needs to be put behind it and the expertise that I have. But I am leveraging it to probably allow my brain to do more of that thinking in many different ways. But you're kind of talking about we could do things quicker. I challenge a little bit, and we can do some things quicker for sure, but I still need to use my brain. If I could plug myself in, it would be great. I'm probably going to have to put a lot of that information, because there's nuances with clients that I'm constantly dealing with that AI is just not going to know. And so how do I get that in? How do we marry together, basically? The other question that's kind of coming up for me right now is implementation. So we keep talking about getting this done and, embrace AI, and how do you have any ideas of exactly how to implement? Partners of mine are getting chief AI officers and all of this. What are your thoughts on that? Go ahead, Doug.
Sure. So what's important, though, is, and I see this all the time, well, what's your AI strategy? Well, I'll be honest with you, I don't know if you need an AI strategy. What is your business strategy, and how can AI support that overall strategy? Mm-hmm. That's the bigger question you should be asking, is because AI is a capability. It needs to be outcome driven. Organizations need to be asking the right questions for themselves. Right now, we're helping a lot of organizations figure out what does all this mean to them. Small organizations, large organizations, across every industry. And it starts with use cases. Number one, I should say, it starts with education. What is this technology, and how can it benefit my business? That personalization for an organization. Second, how do I identify use cases? What are the ones that are going to move the needle for me that align to my business strategy? What are the big use cases? How do I prioritize them? And then we heard earlier this term agile. How do I work in an agile way that I can fail fast or learn quickly and be able to succeed and move things to production and go do it again? Eventually, you start to build the capabilities model, your preferred capabilities model around the technologies and these models. And also keep in mind, they're changing on a daily basis. So you need to have a modular approach. So it's not just I'm going to go with AWS or Microsoft and forget it. You need to make sure that you have a technology watch. So align your strategy to your corporate vision, identify really solid, good business use cases, and have a modular capability strategy around AI.
Doug, those are great points, and I absolutely agree with you. I would say also, one thing to consider is you may not need an AI department, right? But you do need some AI advisors, because those AI advisors may be looking at or working with other companies and applying and finding out best practices that they can bring into your organization. The other thing that I would say is, how do you get started with AI? Think about your top 3 strategic initiatives that you've got within your organization. Or think about the top 3 tactical things that are happening within your organization that you need to get a handle on in order to grow your business, reduce costs, improve customer service. And so, give you a really quick example of that. So, we do a lot of work in the healthcare provider space. One of our clients about a year and a half ago was experiencing a problem with no-shows, right? 25, 30% no-show rate, just through the roof. Imagine if your clients didn't show up 25% of the time that you set up an appointment with them, what your revenue would look like, what your costs would look like. We actually came up with a predictive no-show model that would predict who's likely to no-show. And while this isn't a large language model, it's another example of an AI model. That model was about 90% accurate. Imagine now that on a day-to-day basis, week-to-week basis, that client can now do a run for the next 30 days to see who's likely to no-show, and possibly double book that person and put a strategy around that for how you deal with what happens when that patient shows up. That was a real business problem that they had at a tactical level. Strategically, it affected revenue, right? It affects a whole lot of different things. But I would encourage you to think about, those top 3 strategic initiatives or those top 3 tactical initiatives. How can AI help us get a handle on this problem?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I think, to some degree, it's important to understand the tools. It's important to be educated. But no one's going to know more about your business and what you're doing than you. And so to have that ability to actually leverage off these tools, and again, there are a lot of different ones. So I think that's really the key, what we were talking about. It is step 1. It's understanding what's out there, what can be used, and what effects does it have, right? We talked about, like we said before, information. Where is it going? Is it accurate? How useful it is? But again, the actual use cases within your organization, within your practice, are really going to be more apparent to you once you understand the different abilities of the AI, right? You talked about that great example of putting that presentation together. That's the type of thing that once you understand the capabilities of AI to do that, and you can actually roll that out within your practice, it can really have benefits to your organization, just in the efficiencies it will create for you alone.
Yeah, and Gary touched on a really, really important part. Don't fall in love with the technology, because traditional AI may be all you need. You may just need to be able to crunch some numbers, put an algorithm on it, put a reporting layer on it, and you're good to go. You don't need all this generative AI and everything, all these large language models. So bring the problem to the right technology and then solve that problem, and then go do that again. You may need it, of course, for other creativity or content generation, but in a lot of cases for traditional AI, that's going to do the job for you.
That's great. I like to use it a lot for sales and research, and it helps tremendously take hours off of my time of looking up prospects, identifying some cool ways to get at them, looking at what they're already doing and holes that I can fill. So there's a lot of good things baseline. But one of the questions that always comes up for me and in my industry is, who owns these things that AI is creating? If you're creating a logo on AI, if you're even creating, a press release or any sort of content, Give me your opinion on that.
Okay, I can give you my opinion. I'm never short of opinions, that's for sure. First thing I want to say is my marketing person still works for me. She's just doing other things. She's being more productive. So just in case she's looking, you're still with us. Secondly, right now, if a computer generates an image, that image may not be copyrighted, right? And so if you're in the legal profession and you don't have an AI practice in your legal profession, you need to get one fast because there is a lot of litigation going on right now on this very topic. And I don't think there's any end in sight at this point. What you're starting to see, and Doug touched on it earlier, is that companies are now trying to pull AI and generative models into a private cloud, which gives them the ability to own the material that's being developed. If you're using ChatGPT and you're just throwing everything out on ChatGPT, that means you and your competitor owns that information, right? And anybody else owns that information. So we're now starting to see companies pull in, develop their own private clouds, if you will, and put the technology into those private clouds, much like what you do today, such that you can own it.
Is there a typical size, like a small business doing that, or is that more mid to large?
Right now, it's more mid to large, but you can do it as a small business as well. You can bring that technology into your environment. And specifically, we're talking about generative AI types of routines. If we're talking about predictive analytics, predictive modeling, that you can bring internally today. I mean, that's doable right now.
Yeah, and I think the other thing to remember is that, right, this is, like we talked about, these generative models are relatively new, so it's somewhat the Wild West still in terms of all these different issues, both copywriting from the output, the input as well. There have been lawsuits regarding how these models are trained, I think the New York Times sued because their articles were used to train some of these models. So there are definitely a lot of questions, and I think this happens with any new technology, and it's something that is going to be defined within the next 2, 3, 4 years as this technology continues to advance. So there are definitely a lot of question marks still out there.
Yeah, but the recommendation is jump into the pool. And the reason being is it's a risk-reward business in many ways. From a marketing perspective, how many of folks go through hundreds of stock photos to try to figure out what is the best photo that represents this campaign, or what I'm trying to ideate, or what I'm trying to put out to my targeted customer? Now you can just put it in words and it will generate that for you, as was talked about earlier. Now, do I own that piece of collateral now? Is it my own intellectual property? That's yet to be seen. Gary talked about, well, no, you don't just yet. However, is that too much of a risk for you? Or is that something that the reward is so great that the timing, the personalization to your customer, that might be an acceptable risk for your organization to not own that generative AI output, but being able to target your customer so eloquently.
Yeah, and those are great points. So I'm full of examples, right? I'll give you another example. So I'm also the chairman of the board for the African American Chamber of Commerce in New Jersey. We've got another board meeting coming up. We need a description of all the subcommittees. I was like, do I really have to do this? ChatGPT, can you generate a description of these committees that I want to include? All right, now it generated it. We went back and forth. Me and ChatGPT. It's kind of like my friend now, right? We went back and forth, but within 15 minutes, I had a full description of those committees that I really didn't mind if it was out in the internet, right? I mean, I just didn't mind if it was out in the cloud, yeah. but it got the job done.
And then one final, data privacy is so important. I look forward to the session right after this one that talks specifically on this. But the guidance I provide to my team, and we all have an IP business or intellectual property business of some sort, right? There's some asset or thought that really defines us. If you're not comfortable putting that out on social media, you shouldn't be putting it into a generative AI engine either. And if you live by that philosophy, then you're going to protect your data. Just as I would review my email 3 times before I send it, keep in mind, if I'm uncomfortable putting this on LinkedIn or Twitter or others, I shouldn't be putting it into a generative engine as well.
Thank you. And I was going to say, with stock photos, rights managed, royalty free, they're not yours anyway. But if you're taking your own photography, which a lot of my clients want because they don't want to look stockish, then you're good. So it's a lot of it doesn't necessarily matter per se if you're a stock photo user, if you're using the images from AI, in my opinion. What are some tools you guys recommend for measuring AI's ROI?
Yeah, I can start there. Make sure that, first of all, you define those business cases. Earlier, I talked about from a strategy. You need to understand, what are you trying to solve for? That's the first part. Solve for something and put metrics around that. And there's different types of metrics. There's optimization of your processes, throughput, velocity. There's technology gains that you can have as well around reduction of cloud cost or AI cost or consumption cost. But make sure, whatever it is, define it and put it into your return on investment or ROI model, because that's what's going to be important. There's ways to monitor all of this stuff, all of your throughput where fingers hit keyboards, believe it or not. I talked about automation. We can measure where fingers hit keyboards and the reduction of that human interaction time with that business process. All of these things can be measured, but the important part is it is measured and it is monitored and it is reported on, because that is what's going to show you that you are getting benefit out of your overall generative AI or AI program.
I think that's right. It's important to define the business case, right? And that's going to look so different for everyone depending on if you're using it at a high scale or a really small scale to just check your emails, for example. But you need to make sure there is a business case for it and that you are putting something measurable around that to be able to determine, okay, this is working well. If not, we can shift it. We can do something different. But I think that's exactly right. It's defining it and making sure you have something measurable.
Yeah, and I think we've got a lot of small businesses in the room. I'm a small business myself, and so for me, probably the biggest metric is time. How much time am I actually saving, or a team member is actually saving on a particular task? And so there are a ton of metrics, and we can all talk to them to ad nauseum, but for me, it really boils down to time.
Mm-hmm. Agree. Betty, how are we on time?
You have about 15, little over 16 minutes.
Total? Thank you. Okay, we'll do a little bit more of this and then some Q&A. So looking at, I think we pretty much touched on this, but overall, what would success look like for a company using AI? Izzy, I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we really did say, it's going to look a little bit different for everyone. And so I think from your specific company or your specific practice, again, it's really about being very focused and very intentional. How am I putting this in? Yeah, it's a great tool for people just sort of using ad hoc, all these things we talked about, right? Almost more like a supercharged Google search when you're trying to look up some information or find things out. Or actually what we really talked about a lot today is it seems like it's amazing and it is amazing for generating ideas and for giving you insights and different thoughts. So I think it's really, really helpful, but again, you have to be able to take a look at it and make sure that it's achieving what you want it to achieve in the right way. And also really just remembering that you need to put in, we talked a little bit about this, and we talked about this earlier too, but with this new technology, there's going to come a whole new world of issues. There's going to be a whole new world of scams. You hear about things where people are getting called saying that their loved ones were kidnapped. It's in the voice of their loved one, right? So we talked about this a little, but it's really important to understand what can be done and just make sure you're putting in those safeguards to make sure it's being used effectively and ultimately measuring that to make sure it's actually achieving what you want it to achieve.
And just as we talked about the importance of personalization or the opportunity of personalization with generative AI and AI, the outcomes or the success is just as personalized. Earlier I talked about what is your vision of your organization, of your company? Where do you want to go? Well, that's a personal vision. AI will support or enable that vision. So connecting your success to that vision in AI. What's very intriguing is some of you will dramatically transform your businesses based off of these new technologies. You could go from a services business to an IP business, to a data business. Some say data is the new oil in so many ways, because that's where organizations, that data that you're collecting is so rich in value, and the monetization of that data can transform your business. And deriving new insights about your customer through personalized marketing, opening up a new channel or a new demographic for your business or service, that could be success to you. So success will be different depending on how you want to apply it and what questions you are asking these models.
Yeah, I think measuring success is iterative, especially this is like the Wild Wild West. It's new. However, what I would say to you is that you already have the tools in place to measure the success of AI. If you're business owners, you justify whether or not the cost of bringing on a new employee. If you're a big corporation, you will justify how to execute a new marketing initiative based on the number of metrics that you have out there. You measure AI in the same way, right? It's just another tool for you. Don't be afraid of this thing. Embrace it. It's simply another tool for you. You are already equipped with measuring the successes of your campaigns, sales campaigns, your marketing campaigns, your customer support initiatives. Measure this in the same way. As a small business, the way that we look at it, again, is in time. How much longer or shorter did it take us to deliver a proposal to a client versus what we were doing a year ago? I mean, it boils down to some real simple things. Doug, and I think when we were talking, you were talking about an example where you've created, y'all use some students from Rutgers to really call through RFPs. You should probably mention that.
Yeah, absolutely. So we work with the Rutgers University, we work with other universities, NJIT as well, around student projects. And one of the projects we assigned to the students was how can we leverage a generative model who can understand who CGI is and be able to go across publicly available RFIs, if you're familiar with that term, a request for information or a request for proposal, and recommend back to us which ones we should actually go after. And take it another step further, write the proposal for us, or write the response to the RFP at least about 50% or 60% of the way there, based off of publicly available information on who CGI is. And we got very, very far with students that were learning these languages. Number one, they're thirsty for all of this information. They're already applying for it. The computer science departments are teaching these types of models already within academia. So it was awesome to see how far they came, because we first gave them that prompt. Their faces, they were in awe. Are you kidding me? How are we going to do this? What do you mean? And by the end of the project, we had a workable model that was able to get us at least 50% of the way that we wanted to go from that student project. It was excellent. And it's value back to CGI because we can service our customer just a little bit better. Thanks for reminding me of that. That's
yeah, great. And so were you able to repurpose a person that was doing that on a regular basis to do something at a higher level?
Yeah. So as a management consulting firm, we can then take someone who yes, is dedicated to building RFPs to now listening and developing offerings for our customers. So we didn't eliminate anyone, right? That's always the promise of technology. We heard it never eliminate FTE, but you repurpose those individuals to go do something more valuable for your organization. And that's exactly what we did as well.
Yeah, how many times do you hear in the day, there's never no work to be done. Like there's always something to be done. There's always something on my idea list that I haven't got to because of the minutia maybe getting in the way. And if I can remove that and be able to focus more on the business versus in the business, I'm game, right? And that's really huge as a business owner, a small business owner for me. Is there any other closing statements anyone has before we go to Q&A? All right.
I just have one.
Yeah.
Dive in, close your eyes, and just jump. Don't think, just jump.
Is this like throw the baby in the pool and they'll learn to
Pretty much.
swim? Okay. So who's got any questions? None are bad. Go ahead. You want to give?
Hi, I'm Michelle Conway, Focal Point Executive and Business Coach. I've been working with a lot of small business owners. A lot of them are child care centers, and they've never used AI. So I've been kind of prompting them to use AI to build their job descriptions, to writing emails to their family, to the families of the children that they serve. And so do you guys have any advice on how to get people who are very, very timid with AI to kind of dive into that pool?
So before we go there, I just have one thing about the job descriptions. That's a wonderful idea. One thing that is really big right now I've noticed is DEI, obviously, and there is a lot of research showing that certain job descriptions don't appeal to certain people, and AI can help you remove any of the non-intentional wording that may be skewed or biased. And that is something J&J is doing, and a lot of companies are doing, so it's really a cool additional layer to just creating job descriptions, to throw that out there.
Yeah.
Who's got it?
One
Go ahead,
one of the challenges that I see, and I direct that question, is a lot of times we can talk at a very technical, we go deep, and we start to confuse people. And if they don't understand generative AI or any large language models, it just goes right over top of their heads. So we need to be able to talk about these topics in a natural language and use examples that they would understand. And reflecting back on this morning's opening remarks, notice how everything was more in our personal lives, talking about the Matrix, talking about movies and things of that sort of how we can leverage these technologies, how it can be applicable to them. Explaining it to them in their language, using examples from their everyday life, will get them excited about the art of the possible for the technology. And then the next part is teach them to have that conversation with the technology. If you can teach them to build a prompt engineering, to go a little bit deeper there, if you can teach them how to have a conversation about what they already know, it's just a matter of getting that out in a structured way into a generative engine. That's all you need to do. And then they can start to have that natural conversation with it. You just have to get them over that, I'll use fear of, or uncertainty of that they don't know enough, because they do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would also say, kind of like pick a target. If you've got, let's say, your client has a staff of, let's say, 10 people. Find one that you can make an example of, right? So if there's emails that they've got to rewrite, have them load, and they're using Chrome, make sure that they load up the ChatGPT plugin as an example. When you're writing an email, or you could use Outlook, when you're writing an email, say, hey, just cut and paste that piece, stick it into ChatGPT, and let's see what it comes up with. And work on that one person. When that person starts becoming more productive, it could catch on, is what I'm saying. So that's one strategy that you could use.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that I usually try to do is, break it down, keep it simple. It's not necessarily at its lowest form, right? The models and all these prompts and other things. For someone who's kind of just stepping into it, it's here, ask it a question, see what it says, right? We saw at the great keynote this morning, literally just talk press the button and talk to it and see what it puts out. So I think there are a lot of simple ways to kind of help people get their feet wet at first. And then once they're used to it is really when you see people begin to understand the possibilities of the different ways they can utilize it and adapt it to actually become more efficient and better at what they're doing.
Great. Yep, we got one over here.
Hi, I'm Dan Pace with Genuine AI, I do AI consulting. Totally agree. You should jump into the pool, wade in, walk in. I want to ask a question about the deep side of the pool, the deep end. You did mention the other AI models for like finding a type of like model customer or just like a number crunching part of AI. And one of the things that I found really fascinating is how much easier that's gone to access all these other types of models that aren't the large language models, the GPT-4, the Gemini. Can you touch on maybe the process of maybe like cost or like how much work would be involved in making those more custom and smaller, more number crunching type of AI models?
Sure, I can address that. So in many ways, the costs associated with some of these, well, let me back up. So trying to keep it simple, if you're looking to do some really simple data analysis, you've got data that is not proprietary, then you actually can stick that data or a table into ChatGPT, and it'll actually generate some trending information for you. I mean, this stuff is really coming far. You want a bar chart, it'll do that for you. If you want to get a little more advanced, pay the $20 a month, and you can start seeing others. When you start getting into the creation of predictive machine learning models, there are many strategies out there for making that cost effective for you. But to me, that's when you need an AI advisor or partner or a human co-pilot to help you understand what your options are, what's possible, length of time, costs, things of that nature.
Yeah, I'll take this in just a little bit different direction as well, which is too many times we hear about these new technologies, we want to jump in, and a lot of what we talked about today is just publicly available. But once we start to really get into enterprise data and large sums of data, keep in mind, a lot of this is not cheap. So you need a strategy around cost optimization. We started this in cloud as well. Cloud's cheap, just move it to the cloud. Well, a lot of folks move to the cloud and they realize that's not too cheap. And now they're starting to think about pulling things back or more of a hybrid approach. We're starting to see the same thing with cloud cost analytics and making sure that what we're doing from a strategy perspective has a FinOps or financial operations strategy to it. Because very, very quickly you can find big bills coming in the mail from these hyperscalers like in AWS and Microsoft or Google that you weren't intending because of your overall strategy. So you got to be careful there as well.
We got one more. One more, and then we got to wrap it up.
Hi, I'm Kim Keating from Zago Manufacturing Company, and I run sales and marketing. And I love what you said about strategy and how to measure programs that you're working with. My concern is seeing things through rose-colored glasses. Like you mentioned to the left that measuring time, productivity. And I can see that with like the tangibles, with invoicing, how it can help in terms of healthcare and where that's going. But how do you do it with the intangibles or things that are, kind of valued on quality and expertise, like proposals? You save time. Did you win more business? That's the other side of this, is how is it impacting, what you're able to account for. And I've been thinking about that because I just happened to read an article 2 days ago about a healthcare IT company who they did an experiment where they had about 26 of their employees solve a business problem. Half of them had, used ChatGPT, and the other half didn't. And they found that the ChatGPT, those who used it, they did very well. They got a couple of A's, B's, C's, one high D. The people, they got a couple of C's, some B's, but a lot more A's. And I think that says something, is that, we have to ensure that people just don't get lazy with the data that they're using. So the ideas were good, but were they the best? And we may be there one day, but I think it just boils down to don't underestimate that what you can bring to it, and not to just kind of rest on your laurels.
That's a great point. That's a phenomenal point. And so, I've run a couple of sales organizations, run one now. And so I don't measure how many AI proposals we've won, but it's how many proposals have we been able to get into the pipeline. And so if we're talking from a sales and marketing strategy, and again, this is a traditional strategy, right? You want to generate 3 to 4 to 5 times your sales as a pipeline. So how do you do that? Let's find ways to get more opportunities into our pipeline that we could actually track on a day-to-day basis. And so that's where AI has sort of helped us. To your point, there's still a human element, especially around quality, because you got to make sure that whatever is generated by human or non-human is of high quality, and you're willing to put your brand and label on it and send it out.
Right, and the other thing to think about is the fact that, right, they, on both sides, in your example, they both got A's. So an A is an A, but who got there faster? And I just remember years and years ago, I was interviewing, and they were talking to me, or asking me how I did tax research. And I said, well, I start by going on Google and typing in my issue, and then I go there. And they were so taken aback. They were like, no, you have to pull out the code and start looking. I'm like, yeah, I get to the same spot in the code you do, but I get there, half an hour faster.
There were a lot more A's from the group that didn't use ChatGPT. ChatGPT had more B's. So that's the pieces that maybe that group was accepting good enough, where the other group was kind of inspiring and challenging one.
Right, and I think that's what it comes down to is you need people in there, you need people analyzing the information and ultimately making those decisions. That's where the A's are, but it's more about how you get the information to make those decisions, and then that's where AI can really come in handy.
Okay, we had 2 more. I don't know. We're told to wrap up. Yeah?
I actually think I hate to say it, but I think
Yeah.
we're at time.
Yeah.
We're conscious of getting people out of our time today. So, however, the panelists are here, so please grab them, because we're going to take a networking break right now. And let's have a great hand for